The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Hey, welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization show, where we talk with HR and business thought leaders about living and working in a world where the wired, the tired, and technology converge. I'm your host, Ira Wolf, and I'm here with my co-host, Keith Campagna, who for the second week in a row is right beside me.
Live in studio.
Yeah. And our sponsors, once again, are JobFight and Success Performance Solutions. Keith, I'll bet today's show was never on our radar before we started this, and it's probably not something that many listeners have thought about. Many companies have thought about using, kind of in this race for talent.
Yeah, no, it's a wild concept that you really need to be creative anymore to get in front of passive candidates, qualified candidates,
or active candidates. Any candidate.
Right, sure, all of them, and even the idea of, something that I work on full time now is this idea of how do you create a corporate culture in 2019? It seems like an uphill challenge the whole way, but all things considered, if you have really cool ideas like the ones we're going to be talking about today, it probably will make it easier for you.
Yeah, and I think you said right before we started, this sounds like we're going down a rabbit hole, because we're going to be talking about podcasts. Our podcast is going to talk about podcasting.
Right. This is some sort of a third dimension, fourth dimension thing we're going into here.
Yeah, and we got a great guest today, Michael Greenburg. He, in every sense of the world, is is an entrepreneur. He's the founder of a company called Call for Content, which is his reason for being on the show, but we'll get back to Michael in a minute. Like we do each week, it's time to share a couple ideas about what's going on in our world and the world of Googlization, which seems to be picking up theme, that title, that topic. That I didn't realize that even when I wrote in the age of recruiting in the age of Googlization, that it became this theme that stuck with me over, at that time, 10 years, because I wrote the book Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization in 2008, and that's what catches on. People love that.
I know. Every talk that I give, every presentation I give, when I say Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization, everybody smiles. Yeah. Whether or not they have long hair, no hair, any hair, they're just like, people catch on to it. It's a pretty funny. It's a great term.
It's a tough race between that and the wired, the tired, and technology.
Right.
People get it. But this morning, I don't know if you met my friend Mark Walker.
I don't think so.
I don't think he actually, funny story, we were on a conference call together, and the conference call generated in Minneapolis. It was through a mutual publisher that we work with, and he, when we were on the call, we just started to talk about what the weather was, was one of these things. What's the weather like? Where are you calling in from? Turns out he lives in Broadheadsville. He lives down the road.
Right.
Yeah. So we became friends a couple years ago, and it's been good. But anyway, I had breakfast with him this morning, and a couple things. I felt really good about it because I trust Mark's credibility and his leadership, and we're one of his main podcasts, and he says he's got so many distractions and so many things on his list each week that sometimes that's that gets in the way, and that's a problem. But he said how it's one of his favorite podcasts, but one of his most favorite episodes was the one on caregiving.
Sure.
He said that just resonated with
Absolutely.
him, and through our course of a conversation, we had a few hours. We're there about an hour or so. We covered a lot of territory. But one of the things that his company does is they have a program for identity theft, and they sell it to companies as an employee benefit.
Yeah, sure.
And it's been a struggle because, on the list of, hey, we've got so many dollars to allocate. Would you like to have a program that can help you protect your identity, or do you need it for healthcare?
Right.
And obviously, where the dollars go.
Yep.
But he said he was talking to somebody the other day, And so two things came out of this. One is we need to get somebody on our show to talk about this.
Sure.
But he said, he was talking to somebody, and he said, I'm sorry for being so distracted, but my wife had her identity stolen, and he's spending like hours, and he's just consumed because it's affected everything.
Oh my gosh.
And it's like, so I started to ask, it's like how widespread is not, well, I don't know how widespread identity theft is, but how widespread is its impact on employee productivity in the workplace?
Sure.
So we're talking about getting somebody from his company or
Right.
somewhere else and talking about identity theft, but that was the first thing. So it all sorts of tie in,
Yep.
with that. So not only do we have caregiving that's a distraction, but identity theft and a million other things. And then from there, I went to my bank, local branch, just around the corner. You pass it. Walk in, there's three, and this goes into the H and HR story. And, I'm talking about that at the end of the month.
Yep.
And, everybody always bristles, and it's like, hey, we need to do something, and machines are taking my jobs, and that's a focus. I walk in, there's three tellers there. Not one of them greets me. I'm the only customer. There's no one else in the bank. So there's three of them there. Two don't raise their head. One, I go fill out my deposit form, which I rarely go inside the bank, but I needed to pick something up. So I go in there. Nobody does that. I go through the transaction. Still, there's no conversation at all. I just placed my deposits on the shelf. She takes them. She processes them. And I just spontaneously at the end, I'm not sure I was the one that was thanking. But I said, hey, thanks. And she goes, you're welcome.
Yeah.
That's it. It's not like, hey, is there anything else I can do for you? So, when we talk about this thing about keeping the H in HR or putting the H back in humans, sometimes engagement is, and I did put a post up on LinkedIn this morning about it too. Sometimes engagement is better with a chatbot. I get more satisfaction. It's quicker. There's actually more engagement. It seems more polite. It seems more human-like than a lot of the interactions that we get face-to-face with people.
Well, it speaks to, so what we're talking about is, we could call it a candidate experience, we could call it an employee experience, and we could just call it a human experience. But the truth of the matter is, having the emotional ride that goes along with interaction. At JobVite, we used to say that as long as you provide a not negative experience, you have an advantage.
Oh, absolutely.
Because of the way people are and the lack of, you look at what's the cause to that effect, right? What's the effect is that you have disengaged employees. And that means in that customer facing experience, that means that they're going to be not positive. Yeah. All you have to do is start building out from the inside a little bit at a time to find that engagement. And here, we talk about putting the H back in human resources, right? HR simply can't get there. And it's just and this seems like the theme that always pops up, but if they don't start, somebody is. There are companies we both know that are putting rubber to the road, and they're putting in some employee development systems like LifeWork integration. We're getting the clients on board with that they're trying their best to give their employees a human effect that makes them happier, more collaborative, and more empathetic when they get to work, and then it spreads. And then all of a sudden you have a culture, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. So it's pretty challenging when chatbots are now more human-like and engaging than actually a physical.
Good news. The bar is low. You don't have to be. You don't have to be an A student here.
Yeah, it's that old story. It's that old story of the two guys in the camping, and the one starts to put his sneakers on and he goes, "Where are you going?" It's like in the middle of the night, and he says, "There's a bear out there," and he goes, "You can't outrun the bear." He goes, "No, I can outrun you."
Right.
So the bar's pretty low, which brings us, we can talk about this stuff all day, but and tying this in is how companies, how companies could humanize. What could a company do to humanize the recruitment, retention? How do you stay in touch? And it's hard. And again, it's not that there's a lot of chatbots. There's a lot of technology out there that is very, very helpful at doing that. And I'm going to be at Convergence next week at Cornerstone, and I'm sure there's a million things out there that they'll be talking about some of that. But when I met Michael and was like, hey, how can podcasting be used for recruitment and retention, and are any companies doing it? Because I've talked a lot about using video.
Sure.
And people are into that. They get it. They understand how many, a billion hours of video are watched every day.
Yeah.
So people get that. But it's like, I got to go on screen. I don't like where my hair looks. I'm not dressed properly. I'm not comfortable in front of it. Well, now all you have to do is talk.
Yep.
And so I'm really excited about hearing talking about this with Michael. So let me give you a little background on Michael. Michael's the founder of a company called Gentlemen of Technology. It's a B2B venture creation growth consulting company. That's sort of in the background. I think that's his his hierarchy. But he started his career. He dropped out of college, which we hear a lot about today. Of different careers. He went to a coding boot camp, and then he joined a company called Alumnify as the COO. Raised over $1 million for it. And while he was doing that, he also started to do a little freelance work, and he launched 2 years ago, he launched his first venture, which is called Call for Content, which is our reason that he's on the call today. And it's a full-service podcasting agency for content marketing, audience growth, monetization. And when we met up a couple weeks ago, it was like, hey, what can how can you use podcasting for recruitment and retention? And here we are. So we were finally able to kind of coordinate our schedules, and I'm really excited to talk about podcasting and this world of work with Michael Greenburg. Welcome to Geeks, Geezers, and Googleizations, Michael.
Hey, Michael.
Thanks. Hey, guys. It's great to be on today.
Yeah, no, hey, I appreciate it. So, hey, just a reminder, everybody, we are live today. And if you have any questions for Keith, myself, or Michael about podcasting and the future of work, candidate experience, call 561-623-9429. That's 561-623-9429. And we'll be happy to take your call.
Maybe you had an experience where a chatbot is better than the human that you've dealt with.
Yeah, and you want to share that. So, Michael, let's talk a little bit about, how you went from, kind of coding and web development, and now podcasting is your business, and podcasting is booming, but for a lot of other people, they probably don't understand what it is. So give us a kind of little story about what interested you in podcasting and how you decided it was worth starting a business.
So I kind of fell into podcasting. I was working with Podcast Network as a growth strategy consultant. And they said, hey, you should have a show so you understand what we do. And I said, sure, I'll have a show. And then I had a podcast, and I started interviewing people. They shipped me a whole suitcase full of equipment, and it just sort of went from there. But along the way, I saw the value of podcasting for conversation. I think there's a real dearth, a lack of conversation in today's society. Your example with the bank tellers is a great one. There's no chatting, no back and forth, and I think people miss that. And so podcasting showed me a way to use those conversations and to put those conversations in a way that we could use them for marketing, either for recruiting purposes, as we'll be talking about today, or for growing your lead funnel.
Or anything, right? Ira and I were talking. Yeah. You could use it as a company internal, right? Company culture builder. Yeah, almost like in high school.
Spotify is a great example of that, actually.
Oh, yeah? How so?
They have an internal company podcast and have for years.
Oh, nice.
But when you get into these big teams, big companies, and they're spread out, a podcast gives you a way to do anything from a town hall to a one-on-one chat with the guy who's leading the whole new division, or to the guy on the ground. So, because people don't talk in companies,
right? It's
all silos, and a podcast can help you have conversations outside those silos. And so that's sort of the core way I think about it these days.
Yeah. So again, so you gave one example. Obviously, Spotify. It's not a huge company. I mean, it's a startup, but they've got a lot of employers. We work with a lot of small, medium-sized employers. We have a couple large ones. So you gave some examples. Just as you were talking there, and I think giving examples helps people understand where there might be uses for this, because I think normally they would think about a podcast like we're talking. We're interviewing you, so. Who could you interview within a business, or they're talking about what the news of the day is, or about some themes, and that might not interest every employee, in the company. But what are employees interested in? And it might be, maybe there's a weekly podcast from the CEO or the president.
Sure.
Earlier before you got on the show, my mind was racing with ideas. Short podcasts to explain. Benefits.
Sure.
How do we utilize the benefits? Interviewing employees, what it's like to work for here. There's you might be familiar with it. NPR has a show where you can actually record stories. You can go and record like family stories or interview your family. And just to kind of record memories, and create a library like that. So, what are some, you mentioned some of the things in Spotify. What are some other, are there other examples, other companies that are doing anything? Michael?
So, yes. There's a hospital that's done a really great job, and I'm blanking on the name right now, but I know we talked about it in one of the ebooks I've put out around podcasting, and they interviewed primarily people within the hospital organization about their work, but then they brought in some patients as well. And that podcast was entirely set up to recruit. But they brought in the patients to really show how much the staff and how the community, how the culture of the hospital came through and shone through all the way to the end, to the person that they're there to serve. And that really struck me, because that's a real issue, is how do you show your culture off to everyone when culture is such an internal thing?
But that's a great example, because that's companies are selling their culture. I mean, that's why people are looking for opportunity. Not everybody who wants to work, but most people are working today. I mean, there's more jobs than there are people, or job openings, or there's more job openings than there are job seekers. Is the right way to say that? So part of it is people are looking for a better opportunity. They're not just going to change jobs for some might for a quarter or a dollar, but most people are looking for that better opportunity. So what a better way to kind of create a culture.
Yeah, and I know there's a construction equipment dealer here in Denver, Colorado, that is going to be using a podcast later this year for the same purpose. Except instead of nurses and doctors, they're looking for diesel technicians, and there just aren't enough of them.
Right. Yeah. Well, I can think of that in robotics. Companies in robotics and nursing. Yep. We work with a lot with home care. Yep. Being able to go out and interview some patients. What it's like, and have them tell their story.
And I think the idea there that you get to expose the color of the individuals that work within the organization, and even better if you have patients or customers that are willing to share, in a very, real, live kind of environment.
How do I want to say it? I guess when you started with this company and they said, hey, you should have a podcast, and they gave you a bunch of equipment. One of the things that I talk about, I did a presentation at SHRM Talent, and it's now one of my in my library of presentations, is about how to use video for recruitment. And there's a lot of free tools. Everybody now could be a videographer. They own an iPhone, some type of a smartphone. Doesn't have to be an iPhone, but a smartphone. They can take video. You prop it up somewhere, and maybe it's a selfie. Maybe you put it in a in a holder. And you talk for a couple minutes about what it's like to work here, or you share a how-to. podcasting, but a lot of people don't like to be in front of the camera.
Right.
So podcasting is much easier, but what's the kind of the minimum setup? I mean, if you were to create, and maybe you mentioned you had some ebooks, so we'll have to get that information out to everybody. But what goes into a company says, hey, this is a great idea. How much do we have to budget for it? What's the process? What do they need to do? What are some of the steps they need to follow?
Yeah, so I think the first thing to look at is, are we going to be doing our recordings in person, or are we going to be doing them remotely in some way? And if you're doing them remotely, then your cost of entry is significantly lower.
Right.
So when you say remotely, what's the difference between, what's the difference between those two?
Yeah, so in person, we're sitting across from each other, we're looking at each other, we're talking. Remotely, that could be via the phone, that could be all online, but the key differentiator is we're not going to be in the same room.
Okay, and why is it cheaper? Why is it cheaper to do it remote than if we're in the same room? Because again, I'm thinking, I'm the employer, I got 100 employees, I think this is a great idea, and I want to implement it today. Hey, I got everybody here. Why wouldn't I? Why do I have to call them down the hall if they're physically here?
Yeah, what do you mean by cheaper? Just lack of equipment?
So, yeah, you don't need to spend $200-300 to get a recording set up.
Right.
And for companies where they have locations all over the place, it often makes sense to go that direction. But if everyone is in one place, then you probably want to record in person, and it's worth buying a little Zoom recorder and a couple microphones so that way you can sit down and actually talk with the person.
Sure.
So you're talking about a Zoom recorder, so we put it onto kind of a recorder, it becomes a digital recording, and then we can upload it someplace. So I'd like to take kind of people through the steps of how you would do this. I mean, we do it all the time, and I record all the time. We got multiple ways to do it. I would find it harder to record on a recorder. I usually do it, even if we're sitting next to each other, we usually do it through some type of, either cloud recording service and get the MP3, and then we need to put it someplace. So let's take this one step at a time. I'm the CEO. I decide, hey, I'm going to have somebody interview me, and then I'm going to interview some of my managers, what it's like to work here. We can buy a microphone, at Amazon, Staples, Best Buy, wherever, and they run
Amazon.
Yeah, they run. I mean, $25 to hundreds of dollars. Right. Okay, so somebody needs to get that. Somebody needs to get a microphone. And you said a Zoom recorder. Is that what you?
Yeah, that's what I'd recommend.
Okay.
They're good professional recording devices. They've been used by journalists for years, and they've become the most popular devices for podcasters as well.
Now, who inside of an organization are you working with the most, Michael? Are you is it someone in the IT staff or is it HR?
So it's it'll either come from HR or marketing.
Yeah.
And then normally we'll pull in one of the higher level executives to be the face of the show, right. To show that they're really committed, and that's sort of the core team there. And so depending on the use, since we're talking recruiting today, it'll come from HR, and then normally it'll be that CEO or the head of whichever department needs help recruiting, who you then want to be the interviewer, the host of the show. Assuming they're personable. If they're not, pick somebody else. Right.
I was just about to say, it sounds exciting, but here it is. I have a podcast, but it sounds exciting that one day you might be at your job and someone might say, hey, anyone interested in hosting or co-hosting a podcast just to talk about things within and outside of the company, I could see a couple people like raising their hands that might look to hide their little horns to kind of sauce it up a little bit.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing. You want character in your show and in your host.
Yep.
Well, it's transparency, and there's sort of buzzwords, but they're very real. I mean, it's about being transparent, being authentic, and that's part of the challenge that I hear when we talk about video. And people said, well, I don't like being in front of the camera, and I'm not comfortable. But that's part of that authenticity. I mean, is not necessarily coming in and having a studio, having it recorded in the studio with backdrops and professional. That kind of common guy sense is what's makes it viable. It makes it even better.
Yeah.
So hey, it's as I said, this is always it moves pretty fast.
It's fast for us.
Yeah, absolutely. You are listening to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization show. We're here with our guest, Michael Greenburg from Call for Content. We're talking about podcasting.
Master podcaster.
Yeah, podcasting in business, podcasting for recruitment and retention. We're just starting to get into it. We found out a couple case uses of how companies are doing it. I've got this load of ideas of how it can be used. So it's definitely going into my presentation.
Sure.
By the way,
absolutely.
How you can use that. So we'll expand the video part. But we're also talking about with some of the other trends, candidate experience, customer service. We are live, so if you have a question for Michael or myself or Keith, call 561-623-9429. That's 561-623-9429. And we're going to take a short break and hear from our sponsors, JobVite and Success Performance Solutions. Stay right where you are. We'll be right back in 2 minutes.
Behind everything you're searching for is something you're actually looking for. When you search with the Real Yellow Pages, you get more than a contractor. You get a whole new curb appeal. It's not just getting directions to a dry cleaner with YP.com. It's rescuing an old favorite from the back of the closet. And it's more than finding a locksmith with YP.com on your mobile. It's getting to sleep in your own bed. Whatever it might be, there are more ways to search and more ways to find exactly what you're looking for with the Real Yellow Pages, YP.com, and YP.com on your mobile, only from AT&T.
What's up, everyone? This is Keith from the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization show, powered by JobVite. JobVite knows career paths are made by people, not by open job requisitions. JobVite's platform ties recruitment marketing directly to applicant tracking and onboarding, creating continuous candidate engagement that effectively connects recruiters with qualified passive candidates. Used by over 50,000 recruiters placing over 1 million jobs, JobVite's platform impacts every company in every industry. Check us out at jobvite.com.
Listen carefully. Up to 9 out of 10 job candidates visiting your company career page leave before completing an application. You heard that right. 90% of candidates who want to apply for a job at your company don't. That's just plain crazy, especially in today's tight labor market. Candidate experience matters. Stop turning candidates away. Let Success Performance Solutions help. Call us at 800-803-4303 or register at successperformancesolutions.com/W4CY. Schedule a no-obligation consultation and get special access to insider tips to recruit faster and hire smarter.
Welcome back to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization show. I'm your host, Ira Wolf. I'm here with my co-host, Keith Capagna, who's right on my side today. And our special guest is Michael Greenburg from Call for Content. We're talking about, our podcast is talking about podcasting, and something we kind of uncovered, a new use. One that prior to talking with Michael, I never even thought about, but I'm really excited about this. I think I said it offline. It's definitely going into my presentation. So, Michael, when we left off, we said what people need to do is get a Zoom recorder. There's some other ways that people can record, but that would be an easy one. To pick up a microphone. some type of microphone that multiple people can probably share at the same time, or you just get some headsets. What else? I mean, what happens after that? So we've recorded it to some platform in the cloud on the Zoom recorder. Again, I'm in HR. I don't understand technology. This is all brand new to me. Where do I go from there? What happens? How do I get this? How do I share this with people? What's the next step?
Sponsors.
Yeah.
Well, inside the company, you'll have a sponsor, we hope.
Yeah, well, maybe even one of their vendors that they use, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So I think the first thing you want to look at is if you're going to distribute the show outside of just the company. And if so, who's going to be listening to it? Because I personally like to put my shows on a piece of software called Omni Studio, and that's your podcast hosting provider. So that's where my shows live.
Okay. Now, just curious, how does that compare to like a lip? I mean, I use Libsyn, but a Blueberry. How does it? Is that a competitor or is that different?
It's a competitor. It's
okay.
A little more focused for businesses, and radio. So, but they've got a fantastic small hobbyist plan, and they link up directly with Spotify, directly with Google Play, and so it's nice and easy to publish there.
What's it? Omni what?
Which is what I like. Omni Studio.
Okay. All right.
Great.
But a company could also just upload it to something like iTunes as well, correct?
So you actually need to have it hosting on something, and then you take the RSS feed and you give that to iTunes. Okay.
All right. So they'd still need a platform like Omni Studio or Libsyn, Blueberry. There's some other ones out there.
Yeah, I think there's dozens now. Seems like a new one pops up every day.
Yeah. Podcasting's hot.
Yeah. And so once you've got your hosting, you want to record a few episodes. And I like to launch a show with 3 or 4 episodes for culture. For marketing, we launch with more episodes. But for culture, it's okay just to have a few. And so normally, purpose. So if we're marketing, we want to reach the largest possible audience. And we also, one of the reasons we put out more episodes to begin with is to game the ranking algorithms for podcasts. Because most of them are based on downloads over a small period of time.
Yeah, doesn't iTunes require
for a
5?
Culture show,
I mean, for a business standpoint, if somebody's interested in doing this for business, doesn't iTunes have a minimum of 5?
Yeah, I think they do to push the show live. You can submit it earlier, but it won't actually.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, but
we're intrigued.
Intrigued is always good. So once you've got your show live, or even before that, you've got to record your episodes. And when you're looking at what you want to use your show for, that should give you your first 5 episodes right off the bat. So if we want to show off company culture across the whole company, the first person you probably want to speak with is your CEO, whoever the top dog is there. And then maybe you want to jump around and do the CEO one day and then do somebody who's at the very front lines interacting with customers the next. And you want to try to build that variety of perspectives in your initial batch of show launches. The important thing to remember through all this is making sure that those perspectives align with the message you're trying to put out with the show. So to go back to the example of recruiting for nurses, you want to bring in a patient shows you how they view the interaction with the organization. And that should give somebody a much warmer impression of your organization when they hear how you were able to help and how likely your organization went above and beyond whatever the minimum call of duty is. If you're going after say, nurses in the Detroit area, then maybe you want to bring on one or two other people within the organization as well. And maybe you want to bring on somebody who has a little more cachet in the region.
Sure, like a hot brand or something?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So long as they're interacting with you.
Sure.
As your organization to some degree. And so your goal is to show how all the various parts of your organization interact with the wider community that you're trying to interact with.
Right. Yeah. So that's another great idea. So whether you're a hospital or not, you're an organization. How have you gotten involved in the community? What's your role in the community? And if it's a service, if you're supporting a service organization, if you have an event, talk about the people that attended that, or even the people that benefited from that event, to have them come in and bring that connection in. And again, it's like three. What do they call the Kevin Bacon thing? Three degrees. Three degrees. So it's so you have a company that sponsors some event, but then interviewing the people that benefited from their sponsorship, and connecting people to the community beyond just their direct products and services. Yep. So yeah, my mind's just spinning with this thing. Yeah, you sort of lost me with it. So.
Michael, you've been doing this for a couple years now. What's the greatest unknown that you found out? Like, did anything sneak up on you as you were building out and getting these clients?
Yeah. I mean, the whole concept of the need for conversation, that was not something I knew about. I did not realize how much content comes out of just one podcast episode. When you transcribe that, people talk so much faster than they write.
Yep.
Yeah, I just subscribed. I've got like a million software things. I just got this thing the other day, and it used to be like an hour. To take this hour show and get it transcribed was, it took a couple days. You got like 3 days back, and you paid, like a penny a word, or so much a minute. It was a flat fee that I got this thing for, and in less than 7 minutes, we can have each of our 50 minutes transcribed.
Wow.
Coming back. The problem is it comes back almost too good, because we have all the ums and ahs and things that I'd like to cut out.
Sure.
So I decided, do we edit it or not? But no, that's a great example, obviously, of being able to have a transcript, from that, which also brings an example. Our show is 50 minutes.
Yep.
If someone was to have a podcast within a business show, or within a business, is there an ideal time? I mean, there's a thing called Chirps. I don't know if you've seen that. It's a new app, and they limit you to 2 minutes. It's just 2 minutes, and you can put them out as a personal podcast. It's just whatever you're thinking about, but there's a 2 minute limit.
Like a chirp and a tweet.
Yeah. So Michael, is there a kind of an ideal engagement? I mean, when does it start to fall off? Because people don't necessarily have time to listen to a 50-minute show. So what if you were, again, starting this inside a business to promote recruitment, retention, engagement? What would you, what's an ideal time frame for this? Because I think that's the other thing that would put off people, not only budget, but also how long it might, how long we have to invest in this? How long is this going to take?
Yeah. So the first thing I'd look at is, who are you trying to reach, and how much time do they have? When are they listening? If you don't know that answer, then you're probably looking at a 30-minute show, 25 to 35. The reason there is that a half hour is just a really easy block to work with, and it's also the average commuting time.
Not in the Philadelphia market.
Yeah, that
or the New Jersey market.
You're in Colorado. You got you have great infrastructure. Right. We have no money.
Right.
Yeah,
But
so
I
I
feel you.
should say average commuting time nationally.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if somebody wants to start, I mean, is 10 minutes too short?
No.
Yeah.
In fact, with the right 10 minutes, I think as you get shorter, you have to prepare more.
Right. Stay focused. It's sort of
Yeah.
the TED Talk of podcast, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
But
go ahead.
that can be the most impactful kind of podcast as well.
Okay. So to recap a little bit, I mean, obviously getting started, minimal expense. Many people may already have the expenses. There are actually recorders on your smartphone, so you can do that. There's lots of cloud recorders that are free. So you got the recording. You got one of those platforms we talked about, and pretty much you're in business. So you can start sharing that. You mentioned, but what I want to talk about is one other thing, because one of the hot topics in HR today is employment branding. Is, when a candidate looks at a company, they want to know about the company. They go up, they see the ratings, the reviews on Glassdoor, Indeed, Kununu, somewhere else. And they want to know about that culture, going back to our kind of full circle, going back to the culture thing. If you had a podcast and you're building that, we talk about employee branding, employee review. You talk about authority marketing. Are you talking about the same thing?
Very similar.
Okay, so explain.
Marketing.
Okay, go ahead. Explain what authority marketing is and how that might relate to a business, both for external customers but also for employees.
Yeah. So authority marketing is a marketing technique that uses content to position a business as some sort of niche expert. And I really like to do it with podcasting. I think it works really well with a podcast. And so for external customers, being the best at what you do in your market is an obvious goal for every marketer, every brand. But looking at the benefits of doing that for employees, people want to know they're working for the best. They want to know if you're an organization of caregivers, they want to know that you have the best people at that job. Your customers want to know that, and your employees want to know that as a result of working with you, they get some of that recognition as working with the best and being the best. And so it can become a really powerful tool from an internal perspective, both just to get people more engaged with the company and to get people more excited about it.
So just to give everyone a reference, and again, because I talk a lot about Google and how the things get ranked, 3 out of 4 people who are searching for a job start their search on Google. They may end up elsewhere, but they started on Google. And Google looks at domain authority, something called, which is, I'm not going to get into all the specifics of how that's calculated because I really don't know, other than I know it's important
really
for my position as well. But there's domain authority. So, and part of that is rated on the relevancy of your content. And because video and now podcasting is so relevant, if you're producing regular content and putting it up on your company site, and even more specifically, like we're talking about today, on your career site, and they could be interviews with successful employees, the CEO, the managers, what it's like to work at the company. You got more content. If it's relevant, podcasts to listen to. Now you're increasing your domain authority, which is, again, in your world, in the podcasting world, is increasing that authority marketing, which is increasing your employer brand. And what we've talked about up to this point is that it would cost you under $100 to get started. And probably for the year. I don't know what a subscription is on Omni Studio, but I know you can get, for
$9 a month.
Yeah, and some of them are $5 a month to get started at the basic plans.
Sure.
So yeah, it's just crazy. What a great.
If you're HR, go with a low cost option and then a regular cost option, and you'll have your podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. So very, very helpful. Hey, well, we're up to like almost the end of the show again. And this has been great. It's been helpful to me, kind of put in this perspective. And I've got Michael, as you said, out of a podcast, you get so much content. I've probably got like an ebook, a couple articles. We got our podcasts, and hopefully you and I and Keith will do some work together. I've got some ideas in my head that we'll share offline a little bit. But you mentioned it right off the beginning of the show that you had an ebook. So a couple things. How do people get in touch with you? What resources do you have available if they wanted more information? If they want to talk to you, how do they do it?
So the best way for all of that is to go to callforcontent.com, callforcontent.com.
Okay.
And there, in the upper right corner, you'll find our playbooks, including the B2B podcasting playbook, which goes a little more in-depth on getting a podcast started for a business and includes a whole subsection on culture podcasts like we talked about today. You'll also find the Authority Marketing Playbook, which can help you position yourself for that sort of authority marketing. And you'll find on the very front page of the site a little chat bot in the bottom right corner. Hopefully you like it more than a person. And there you'll see a little button for office hours. I hold office hours every week. I try every day, but I rarely make it. And their office hours are totally free, and you can book some time to talk with me.
Fantastic.
Perfect.
Hey, I got a question for you. You've been ahead of the curve in the podcast world now for several years. You come from the investment background, the coding background. How did we do today? How did the Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization shows stack up?
This is one of my favorite shows to have been on. You guys know your stuff, and you've got a great production team. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, we do.
10 out of 10.
10 out of 10.
Yeah, we neglect to do this on each week, but we want to thank Dee for our calls. She's kind of in the background, making sure things run smoothly and making sure that we get this up on the podcast.
Whenever I'm off-site somewhere and the sound isn't coming through, she makes it work.
Yeah, both of us. So what's some final advice you got, Michael? We got about another minute or two, so what's your final words of wisdom for anyone thinking about podcasting?
Just plan podcast. Plan it as a single season. Do 8 to 12 episodes. Try it once and see what happens. It costs you almost nothing.
Yep.
Yeah. And my advice, having done it a couple times sporadically, off and on, and now that we've got a weekly show, we're sort of forced to do it, which was sort of in the making. I would just say do it.
Yeah, do it.
Just get it started. And if anyone has questions, obviously Michael's the expert, but Keith and I, from the HR perspective, I can see the wheels spinning between the both of us. We're burning up the room here.
Yeah, no,
we got a million things on our mind.
Michael.
So
thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. So I really appreciate you being on the show. We need to talk a little bit afterwards. We'll set up some time again. And thanks again. It was a great show. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun coming on. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Keith, we're sort of at the end again.
Yeah. I think it's fascinating. Here we go, where we kind of blew through a couple of Michael's suggestions where we didn't just say, let's try 8 and see what happens. We just dove into the deep end, which is kind of our style anyway. But I just think it's great how after however many months, here we're at the end of May, and another fascinating new approach to how you can really set yourself apart from a company perspective. It works. It's easy to do. It focuses on the audience. And you can get your community involved. I mean, if you're looking for good ideas, I think we're actually coming up with some good ones.
Oh, this one to me is amazing. Content. So yeah, I've got to figure out before Tuesday, because I'm doing another presentation of how you can incorporate this. So I got to go change my presentation again. But we are just about out of time again. We want to thank everybody for listening to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization show. We're always interested in hearing what's on your mind too. So you let us know know how we're doing. If you're interested in being a guest or a sponsor, just check us out. You can check out.
And we're getting more sponsors in the pipeline, so the cost is going to go up.
Yeah.
Call us soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Good. The sales guy, my sales guy's there. Call us and send requests to who you want to hear. We talked about, definitely want to get somebody on about identity theft. Any other subjects you want to hear about. We're certainly going to be talking a lot more about candidate experience, talent acquisition, employment branding. Check us both out on LinkedIn and Twitter. And thanks again to JobVite and Success Performance Solutions for being our current sponsors. And don't forget to join us next week, Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, W4CY.com, or listen to our podcasts on Spotify, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Google Play, you name it. Until next episode of Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization, this is Ira Wolf and Keith Campagna. Don't let the shift hit your plan.